Hi there, it's Steve here from Velo 21, and in today's video we're answering all your questions about our Purple Gain Speedwax. So sit back, grab yourself a coffee and we'll run through all the frequently asked questions. So first of all, the main thing people have asked is how do I prepare the chain before waxing? Basically you need it as clean as possible. You need to remove all the lubricant, even if it's a brand new chain. Obviously they put a factory lubricant on, which actually they coat all the side plates as well so it doesn't go rusty while it's being stored and waited to be fitted. So yeah, you've got to remove all the lubricant you've been using, even if you've used a wax-based one before. You've got to get everything off to get it as clean as possible before you dip it in the wax. Also, if you're leaving any lubricant on, you're also making it still a lubed chain. It's not a waxed chain, so you've got to get it absolutely perfect, as clean as possible. If you've got an ultrasonic bath, that's great. We recommend running it in about 3 or 4 cycles using degreaser at about 60 degrees. Also, just soaking it in degreaser for a long time just helps soften it up. Using boiling water as well is always a good way. So if you soak it in the degreaser, give it a good wipe down in boiling water for a couple of minutes, swishing it about, and that should remove the last of any lube that's on there, because the heat helps thin the lubricant and then makes it easier to wipe off. So yeah, just get the chain as clean as possible. Once you've cleaned your chain, if you feel it, if you can still feel any lubricant on there, if it still feels slightly greasy, just run it back through the system again, you know, do your cleaning prep again, just to make sure it's 100%, because you've got to get it as clean as possible, else the wax won't be performing at its best. So it's in your interest really to get the chain as clean as possible before dipping. When we come to dip it, we do supply you with a little bit of wire, which comes in handy. We were going to put a bracket on that, but it got too fiddly, and it was just easier just to kind of manipulate it yourself and twist it round. Right, okay, so now the chain is clean, it's on its hanger, we've got the speed links in as well, and that's ready to be submerged when the wax is melted. So once your chain's ready to be submerged, let's talk about the way you melt the wax, because obviously it's delivered to you as a solid lump. The way we're demonstrating it on here is just on a standard gas hob. You can obviously melt it on an electric hob. With a crock pot is a really popular way to do it as well, because it does it very slowly. You can kind of leave it. It will take a while to melt it in a crock pot or slow cooker. You can also do it on a bain-marie style, the way you melt chocolate, put water in the saucepan. That again heats it a little bit slower. We're just demonstrating it this way because we feel most people will be able to do this setup quite easily. So just a standard saucepan on the gas heat. On the lowest heat, it will heat up to about sort of 90 degrees, which is perhaps a bit too hot for the wax. So you just need to keep an eye on, once it's melted, it's kind of ready for dipping really. Remove it from the heat and then just put it back on the heat if you're seeing it start to solidify. So yeah, once you've kind of melted your wax block down, as I say, you can do it in a crock pot, on the saucepan and a bain-marie. They're probably the main 3 ways to melt the wax down, prepared for dipping. Okay, so the wax is melted down now. We've got it just over 70 degrees, so that's ideal for dipping the chain in. So if we take the chain on its loop and completely submerge it, give it a bit of a jiggle over there, and then you might need something just to make sure the chain's fully in. That's it. And then obviously we've just got to keep our eye on that doesn't start to solidify while it's in there. You've got to keep it a liquid while it's dunked, and it needs about sort of 5 minutes in there before turning it over and then treating the other side. Okay, so the 5 minutes has passed. Give it a little bit of a swish about. You can do that obviously before you turn it as well, as you're going along. And then carefully turn it over. Give it another bit of a swish. and then leave it another 5 minutes, and then it's done. Okay, so now that's about the right temperature to bring it out. One final swish about. A little bit of excess dripping off. And that's it, and then we leave it out to hang to dry. Let it just drip over the pot for a minute, because any drips obviously just go back into the wax and then you're not losing any. And then once that's hung and dried out, sometimes it's a good idea just to pop the pot underneath wherever you're hanging it, so if it does continue to drip, you're just not wasting any at all. And then in about sort of 10 to 15 minutes, that'll probably be dry, set and ready to loosen. Okay, so the chain's now cooled down, we're outside, and we're going to free it up, because once it's set, it goes absolutely solid, so it needs freeing up. So you just remove it from the wire and just feed it backwards and forwards over something that obviously you don't mind getting a bit of wax on. Free it up all over. Obviously you're going to get a few bits of fall out. Just do it one way. Just checking that all the links are freed up. And it'll still feel pretty stiff. Then I've just flicked the chain around, so now this is going the other way. Sorry, I'm looking in the camera. So now that's passed the other way over. There we go, right the way over. All the way back. Again, spin it round again, so now that it's facing the other way, and do it back again. Doesn't have to be precise, just try and loosen it up as much as you can. And that's it. Okay, so that's the chain all waxed up. It still feels a little bit stiff. It's not a smooth feel to it as an oil-based one. It still takes a bit of time for it to loosen up on the bike, but that's ready to fit now. So that's ready to fit as you would. Put the chain back on the bike and start to pedal, and it'll loosen up over the next sort of 5 minutes. And you do get a lot of, especially if you're on a turbo, you get a lot of flaky fallout. Obviously you've just seen it coming off on the door handle. It does exactly the same on the bike as well, so there's a lot of flaky fallout, which isn't an issue, it's just the excess coming off, so don't worry about that. If you ride out on the road, you don't get as much. Obviously there still will be some on the chain stays where you'll find it, but if you do it on the turbo, obviously it will collect on the floor as well, so you do get quite a bit of flaky fallout if you fit it and you're doing it on the turbo. Other questions about kind of reapplying this: if you're riding in the dry, you'll easily get, we tested this in the summer and we got over 500 miles out of one chain. It wasn't even squeaking and we reapplied. The kind of optimum to reapply though, it'll be about 300 miles is probably the ideal, just to keep it in that sweet spot. If you're wet weather riding, you will perhaps have to apply it a little bit sooner, but it's better than any other wax that we've tested in the wet as well. You're probably looking about sort of 250 miles per application. So a lot of people have asked me, like, what are the disadvantages of applying the wax? I'd say the only thing really is the application. And I mean, once you're used to that, it's quite an easy process to do. But obviously with a normal lube, you just kind of drip it on the chain. That's a lot easier, because removing the chain, dipping it in the wax, freeing it up, installing it back. Once you're used to that, waxing is, because it's so clean, like the chain's no dirtier than it is now in my hands. Once you're out on the road, obviously you do pick up a little bit of debris, but a little bit of a wipe. It's not, you don't get that horrible oily residue, which is what damages the chain. So the chain will last 4 times longer than an oil-based lube. So to me, that's, you know, sometimes some of the chains are quite expensive now. If you're got running a top level group set, I mean, you can spend about £100 on a chain. So if you can make it last 4 times longer, it's a no-brainer really. So much cleaner. You're also not having to clean the bike up. There's nothing on the chainstay. There's no sort of oily residue from this at all, because it's that wax base. You get that little bit of fallout the first couple of rides, as I say, but that can just be brushed off with a brush or wipe down with a cloth. It's so much cleaner. So if it's making your chain last 4 times longer, it's making the cassette last 4 times longer, it's making the chain rings last 4 times longer. So it's well worth it just investing that little bit more time in the application to save yourself the money in the long run. And plus, it's 1 to 2% more efficient than an oil-based lube, as in power-wise. So if you're pushing out sort of, if your max is say 250 watts for 20 minutes, you're pushing an extra 2% on that is obviously 5 watts. So it's giving you a decent saving in money and in watts. So, you know, it's well worth doing. It's the future of lubricants. It's fantastic. So, other questions that we've had is, what else do I need to lube? Obviously, the jockey wheels are usually seal bearings, but just check with your manufacturer. You might need to put a little bit of lube inside the jockey wheels every now and again, because that is a moving part. Cassette and chain rings you don't have to do anything with. Obviously you've lubricated your chain, so you don't need to put any lubricants on those at all. Also, what do we do with the wax after it's cooled down? So I mean, that is just about cool now. You can leave it in that pan, or just apply a little bit of heat to that once it's fully set. That's not really cool. That's probably still about 30-40 degrees. It's a bit soft to the touch, that is. Just reheat it, it'll pop out. You can also pour it out into something else, that's fine as well. Just make sure it's either something you can heat up so you can pop it back out, or it's flexible that you can kind of get it back out. You know, I'll just use an old saucepan here, so this just stays in the garage now. And this is the one for the wax. So yeah, if you get yourself either an old saucepan, keep it in that. It doesn't need to be covered up or anything like that. You know, you can pop it out and just leave it as a disc in the garage somewhere, or wherever you store your bike. When you come to reapply it, you don't need to fully degrease the chain, as it's not greasy anyway. Yeah, you don't need to fully clean the chain, I should say. What you can do is just give it a wipe down and it's kind of ready for re-dipping. If you do want to remove any of the wax, the best way to do that is not with degreaser, it's with heat, because you'll melt the wax out of the links. So the best way really is to pour boiling water on it, and that will remove the wax from the chain. Make sure it's dry before you re-dip the chain, and then it's all good to go again. And you'll have a silky smooth, clean drivetrain, probably the best you've ever used. So, well worth it, fantastic. It's the future of lubricants. It's brilliant.